He was the perfect husband, a respected creative director. She was the devoted wife, a local saint who spent her life saving innocent creatures. They were the picture-perfect image of a model family. But inside their cozy, loving home, behind a locked study door, a horrifying secret was being curated. A secret collection, not stamps, not coins, but thousands of videos. A party light installed in his 20-year-old stepdaughter's bedroom. A light that was never used for dancing. And a sickening obsession. A dark truth so twisted it involved the very innocent creatures his wife had sworn her life to protect. What happens when the devoted wife finally discovers the truth? When she realizes the man she loves is not a man at all. Today's story is a journey into the mind of a monster hiding in plain sight. If you are ready for a case that will make you question everything, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to this channel right now, because we are about to expose this sick secret. To the neighborhood, they were the Wilsons. James and Jenny. A fixture of San Angelo, solid as the sun-baked Texas earth. He was James, the respected creative director at McLachlan Advertising, the man whose mind spun clever campaigns from thin air. She was Jenny, a local saint, the woman who ran the town's most beloved non-profit pet rescue from their very own home. Their life was a portrait of community and compassion, stable and secure. The house itself was less a home and more a gentle, chaotic sanctuary. It lived and breathed with the sound of claws on hardwood and the soft rumble of contentment. Jenny moved through this chaos with an expert's grace, her life dedicated to what she fondly called her babies. On any given day, the house held a fluctuating population of rescue dogs with matted fur and trusting eyes, cats that had forgotten the cruelty of the streets. This was her purpose, and James, by all appearances, was her proudest supporter. Living with them was Hannah, Jenny's daughter from a previous life, now a young woman of 20 years. Hannah had grown up in this house of revolving paws, inheriting her mother's empathy. She was a college student, bright and sharp, navigating that delicate space between youthful energy and adult responsibility. The bond between the three of them seemed unbreakable. The casual observer saw a complete, happy family. This evening began like countless others. Jenny was in the large utility room, soaked to the elbows, busy with 3 trembling hounds in a specialized grooming tub. The air was thick with the scent of oatmeal shampoo and wet fur. "Hannah, my love, could you grab that blue towel?" Jenny called out, her voice cheerful above the sound of the sprayer. "This one looks like he's about to shake." Hannah laughed, appearing in the doorway. "He's been giving you that look for 5 minutes, Mom." She tossed the towel, her movement easy and familiar. "You're lucky he hasn't already." "We're all lucky," Jenny said, rubbing the dog's head. "Aren't we, boy? You're safe now." James arrived just as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the driveway. He stepped inside, loosening his tie, the armor of his professional life. "I smell wet dog," he announced, his voice carrying a warm, familiar theatricality. "You smell charity, my dear," Jenny replied, emerging from the utility room to give him a kiss. Her hands were damp, and she left a small, sudsy print on his shirt. He smiled, unfazed. "How's the shelter population today?" "Are we at full capacity?" "Always room for one more," Jenny said. "Hey, HJW," James said, nodding to his stepdaughter. He often used her initials, a term of endearment from her younger years that had stuck. "How were classes?" "Long," Hannah replied, scrolling through her phone. "Professor Davies is obsessed with 18th century poets. It's brutal." "Better you than me," James chuckled. Dinner was a loud, warm affair. The conversation was a comfortable weave of their separate lives. James discussed a frustrating client, Jenny detailed a successful adoption event, and Hannah recounted a funny story from the campus library. James was the perfect husband and father, attentive, witty, and supportive. He listened to Jenny's stories with genuine interest, offered sharp advice for Hannah's paper on persuasive language, and helped clear the table. Later, the house began to settle. The sounds of barking faded into the soft breathing and occasional snores of dozens of resting animals. The television murmured in the living room, then fell silent. One by one, the lights clicked off. Jenny stifled a yawn, stretching on the sofa. "I'm exhausted. Are you coming to bed, James?" He looked up from his laptop, his face illuminated by the screen. He offered a slight, tired smile. "In a little while, I just need to decompress, finish up a few emails and clear my head." "You go ahead. Don't be too late," she said. She kissed his temple and disappeared down the hallway, Hannah having already retired to her own room. James waited. He listened to the sounds of the house shutting down, the faucet running, the click of Jenny's bedroom door, the muffled silence that followed. He sat motionless for 10, then 20 minutes. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the gentle ticking of the clock on the mantel. He closed the laptop. The living room plunged into near darkness. He stood up, not with the weariness of a man heading to bed, but with a different, quieter energy. He moved not toward the bedroom, but toward his small study at the end of the hall, the room Jenny jokingly called the second dog room because it housed the overflow of rescue paperwork. He entered the study and closed the door. Then, the soft metallic click of the lock turning. He told Jenny it was to keep the animals out, to prevent them from chewing on wires or sleeping on his keyboard while he worked. It was a perfectly reasonable explanation. James sat down in the heavy oak chair, the one he'd had since college. For a moment, he stared at the blank, dark monitor. The man who had joked at dinner, the man who had kissed his wife, seemed to recede. His face, now visible only in the faint moonlight filtering through the blinds, settled into something neutral, something unreadable. He moved the mouse, and the screen blinked to life. The digital glow cast a cool blue light across his features, highlighting the tightness around his mouth. He was not checking emails. He was not decompressing. The night owl, as Jenny lovingly called him, was awake, and he was beginning his hunt. It had all begun months ago. A single moment that James, in his most private thoughts, would later identify as the turning point. It was not a grand catastrophe but a quiet, digital discovery. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the house was empty save for him. Jenny was at a fundraiser for the rescue, and Hannah was at her university classes. He had been tidying the kitchen when he saw her phone on the counter, charging. It was a rule in their house, a holdover from Hannah's teenage years that he had insisted upon maintaining. He and Jenny had the right to check the children's phones. That was the official reason. Even now, with Hannah at 20, he performed these regular checks. He picked up the device. He had her password. She had given it freely, conditioned by years of his fatherly oversight. He told himself it was about safety. He told Jenny it was about protecting her. He opened her messages, scrolling with a practiced, indifferent thumb. It was mostly chatter with friends, notes about classes. Then, a thread with her boyfriend. He saw a few photos they had exchanged. He tapped one open. And there it was. It was not a single image, but several. They were pictures Hannah had sent to the young man. They were private. They were intimate, poses of trust and exploration, meant for one person's eyes. James stood perfectly still in the quiet kitchen. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. He felt no surge of fatherly rage. There was no impulse to call Jenny, no feeling of betrayal or disappointment. He looked at the images of his stepdaughter, the young woman he had helped raise, and what he felt was something entirely different. It was, as he would later describe it, a spark, a flicker of something dark and intensely curious. It was not attraction, he told himself. It was a sudden, sharp interest, a fascination with the fact that she was doing this, that girls this age are doing this. It was a jolt, a sudden unlocking of a room in his mind he had never known existed. His thumb hovered over the delete button. That would have been the fatherly thing to do. Instead, he forwarded the images to his own private email account. He typed a quick, innocuous subject line, receipts, and pressed send. Then, with methodical precision, he deleted the sent email from her phone, clearing the evidence of his transfer. He erased the thread from her message history, a new, cold logic guiding his fingers. When Hannah returned home, he was waiting. He did not yell. He did not ground her. He called her into the living room, his voice calm, almost gentle. "Hannah, we need to talk," he said. She sat opposite him, her backpack still on one shoulder. "What's up?" He looked at her, his expression one of measured disappointment, a mask he wore with expert skill. "I was checking your phone today. You know the rule." Her face paled. She knew immediately. "Oh. James." "It's not." "Who were those for?" he asked. His voice was low, not angry, but intense. "It was just for my boyfriend," she whispered, her eyes dropping to the floor. "It's private. You shouldn't have. I shouldn't have." His voice sharpened just enough to make her flinch. "Hannah, do you have any idea what can happen with pictures like that? The kind of people who look for those things." He was lecturing her, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking of the images now safely nestled in his inbox. He was thinking about his own words, the kind of people who look for those things. "I trust him," she said, her voice small. "Trust is irrelevant," James said, leaning forward. "You're an adult, but you're living under my roof, and you've been careless. Incredibly careless." The confrontation went on, but his heart wasn't in it. He was performing. He was playing the part of the concerned stepfather. He made her promise it would never happen again. He made her feel ashamed. All the while, the spark was growing inside him, warming into a steady, private heat. He told his wife nothing about the specific images. He only mentioned that Hannah had been careless with her phone again, a vague report that Jenny, busy with her rescue, accepted with a sigh. That night, long after Jenny and Hannah were asleep, James went to his study. He locked the door. He opened his email. He downloaded the images to a new folder on his desktop, a folder he disguised as a work project. He looked at them again, not with the fleeting glance of a concerned parent, but with the focused, analytical gaze of a collector. Then, he opened a new browser window. His fingers, which had crafted award-winning ad campaigns, typed new words into the search bar. He told himself, doing research. He was just trying to understand the world his stepdaughter was a part of. "Once I saw that stuff," he reasoned internally, "I just started looking for other stuff." The door was open, and as the hours passed and the blue light of the monitor painted his face, James Wilson stepped through it, leaving his old life on the other side. He had found his new obsession. It was a collecting thing, and he was just getting started. The investigation did not begin with a siren or a slammed door. It began hundreds of miles away from the Wilsons' chaotic, dog-filled home in the sterile, climate-controlled server rooms of a corporation. It started as a silent, automated alarm. On the 24th of July, in the year 2024, an algorithm at the Dropbox headquarters flagged a file. The system, designed to scan billions of uploads, detected a video file that violated their most stringent terms of service. It was not a judgment call. It was a digital match. The file's signature was immediately cross-referenced, locked, and reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. From there, the digital packet was routed, trickling down the jurisdictional chain until it landed in the queue of the Tom Green County Sheriff's Office. It arrived on the desk of Detective Miles, a man whose patience had been forged by years of sifting through the dark static of the internet. He opened the file, his expectations low. Most of these tips were phantoms, ephemeral accounts that vanished before a trace could begin. They were digital noise. This one, however, felt different. The initial report was clinical, detailing the one video that triggered the alarm. The content was classified as highly illicit, non-consensual material involving adults. It was deeply disturbing, but it was the structure of the account that held Miles's attention. This was not a random upload. This was a vault. He began the slow, methodical work of pulling the thread. His first task was to trace the IP address, the digital fingerprint of the user. He expected a quick burnout, perhaps an unsecured wireless network or a public library. Instead, he hit a wall. The address was masked, routed through a proxy server in Eastern Europe. He backtracked the signal, but it bounced to another server in Southeast Asia, then vanished. Miles leaned back from his screen. This was not a novice. This was someone who knew how to hide. This person was, as the original investigator would later note, sneaky. He abandoned the IP trace for the moment and focused on the account itself. He pulled the subscriber information. The account was tied to a free email address. He ran a query on the email. It had been created only days before the Dropbox account. It had never sent or received a single message, save for the single validation email from the storage provider. It was a sterile, digital tool created for one purpose and one purpose only. Miles felt that familiar prickle of professional interest, the quiet thrill of the hunt. This was not a teenager making a reckless mistake. This was a careful, meticulous individual. This was a collector. He spent the next several days digging deeper into the metadata provided by the service. He could not see the files themselves, only their digital containers. He saw folders. He saw upload logs. The user was not just downloading, they were curating, sorting, renaming. The access logs showed a distinct pattern. The user only logged in late at night, almost always after midnight. The sessions were short, precise. Upload a few files, organize them, and log out. It was disciplined. It was secretive. This anonymous flag was not just another disturbing online tip. It was the first visible thread of a deeply hidden web. Miles had no name. He had no face. He had only the digital ghost of a very careful man, a man who was operating right under their noses in San Angelo. He printed the scant information he had and pinned it to the board above his desk. This was no longer just a flag. It was a case. He was unaware of the monster he was beginning to unravel, but he knew one thing. This ghost understood digital footprints, and catching him would require just as much patience and precision as the man himself possessed. The hunt had begun. The digital breadcrumb trail from the Dropbox account had grown cold. Detective Miles had the what, but the who remained a ghost, hidden behind layers of encryption and disposable email addresses. The user was too careful. Tracing the IP address was a dead end. He knew he was being toyed with by a digital phantom. He needed leverage. He submitted a new, broader warrant to the cloud storage provider requesting any associated metadata, no matter how trivial. He wanted profile information, login histories, and crucially, any data linked to other platforms. Weeks felt like they were bleeding together. The case was stalled, a folder of static on his desk. Then, the return from the provider arrived. It was small. In a subfolder of the user's account, nestled among the illicit content, was a single text file. It contained 2 words, smoke obsession. It was not a file name, it was a handle. A username. This was the break Miles needed. He began running the handle across every social media platform, every dark forum, every message board he knew. It was a common enough phrase, generating thousands of false leads. But one hit stood out. An Instagram account. The profile was private, the icon a generic swirl of color. But the account's activity, visible through its public-facing metadata, was telling. It was followed by and followed dozens of other suspicious, private accounts. It was a node in a much larger, darker network. Miles now had an active target, a digital entity that was alive and communicating. He began the slow, painstaking process of monitoring smoke obsession. He obtained a new warrant, this one for the Instagram account, allowing him to see the login attempts in real time. The user was still cautious, still sneaky. The logins came, as they had with the Dropbox account, in the deep hours of the night. Every time, the IP address was masked, bouncing from servers overseas. The user was disciplined, a digital night owl. Miles knew he was not dealing with an amateur, he was dealing with a professional. He waited. He knew this kind of discipline was exhausting. The user had to be perfect every single time. Miles only needed him to make one mistake. The mistake came on a Tuesday at 2:17 in the morning. A login alert pinged Miles's monitor. An IP address flashed, a clean one. It originated not from Russia or Singapore, but from a local server in San Angelo. The connection lasted less than a second before it was terminated. The user had been quick. They must have launched the application before their proxy was fully engaged, realized their error, and immediately shut it down. But less than a second was all Miles needed. He had the IP. He ran the trace. It was not a residential address. He stared at the result, a feeling of cold disbelief settling in. The address belonged to McLachlan Advertising, one of the most respected firms in the city. The Phantom had a day job. The investigation moved from the digital world to the physical one. A quiet, high-priority request was made to the firm's IT department, who had remote access credentials to that specific workstation, who was, or could have been, logged in at 2:17 in the morning. The personnel file they sent over was thin, because the employee was senior. He was a man with over a decade at the company, a man named James Wilson, 57 years old. Detective Miles finally had a name. He pulled James Wilson's file. Married. Wife, Jenny Wilson, director of the local pet rescue. A stepdaughter, Hannah, aged 20. He was a pillar of the community, a creative director, a family man. He was, by all accounts, perfect. Miles knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his gut, that he had found his man. The persona of the family man was the perfect cover for the sneaky collector who hunted in the dark. He began to type. The warrants, this time, would not be for a ghost. They would be for a man of flesh and blood. He requested warrants for the person of James Wilson, for his vehicle, for his computer at McLachlan Advertising, and for his home address. The onion was being peeled, and the center was beginning to be exposed. The morning of August 21st dawned just like any other, unaware of the lives it was about to permanently alter. At the Tom Green County Sheriff's Office, Detective Miles held a final, brief meeting. 2 teams were assembled, their roles clear and distinct. "All right," Miles said, his voice low and steady. "Team Alpha, you're with me. We take McLachlan Advertising. Team Bravo, you have the residence. The warrants are signed and active." He looked at the officers who would be going to the Wilson home. A reminder, the wife, Jenny Wilson, runs a large-scale dog rescue from the house. Expect chaos, expect a lot of animals. Your primary objective is to secure the premises and any digital devices. Be prepared for a very emotional, very confused homeowner. He then turned to his own team. Our target is James. He's smart, he's sneaky, and he's been at this for a long time. We go in quiet. I want him isolated from his workstation and his phone before he even knows what's happening. The warrants are for his person, his vehicle, and his office. He checked his watch. We move precisely together. The last thing we need is for him to get a panicked call from his wife before we've secured his devices. We cannot allow him the chance to remotely delete anything. We move now. The teams departed, 2 separate convoys heading to 2 very different locations, their paths set to converge on a single, unsuspecting family. Team Alpha, led by Miles, arrived at the corporate building housing McLachlan Advertising. It was mid-morning and the parking lot was full. Professionals in business attire moved in and out of the building. The officers, dressed in plain clothes, blended in seamlessly. They walked through the automatic glass doors into a quiet, climate-controlled lobby. A receptionist looked up from her computer, a polite, professional smile already forming on her face, ready to direct them. The atmosphere was one of calculated calm, the gentle hum of productivity. Miles and his partner approached the desk, their steps silent on the flooring. Simultaneously, miles across town, Team Bravo pulled up to the Wilson residence. The contrast was immediate and jarring. Before they even stepped out of their vehicles, they could hear it, the frantic, high-pitched, and deep-chested barking of dozens of dogs. The officers exchanged weary glances. This was not going to be a quiet entry. This was not a sterile office building. This was a fortress of sound. The lead officer for Team Bravo unlatched his gate and stepped onto the walkway. The sound of the dogs intensified, a wave of noise hitting him. He and his partner moved up the front path, their presence already announced by the chorus of alarms inside. In that exact same moment, back in the quiet lobby of McLachlan Advertising, Detective Miles reached the reception desk. The woman's polite smile was fixed in place. At the house, the lead officer took a breath and raised his hand, his fist clenched, preparing to knock on the door and shatter the illusion of the Wilsons' perfect life. James Wilson. Detective Miles's voice was quiet, professional, cutting through the low hum of the office. James looked up from his monitor, his focus broken. A polite, slightly annoyed expression was on his face, the look of a creative director interrupted mid-thought. He saw 2 men standing by his desk. They did not look like clients. "Yes," he said. "Can I help you? I'm Detective Miles, Tom Green County Sheriff's Office." "Do you go by James or Michael?" The casual question, the use of his middle name, was the first small stone to strike his composure. "Michael," he replied, his voice a fraction tighter. "My friends call me Michael. What is this about? We need you to step away from your computer, Michael. Please stand up." James did not move. He was computing, his mind racing. "I'm in the middle of a project." "What is this regarding?" "Stand up, please. And we will need your personal cell phone." Miles's voice was no longer a request. A few heads in the open-plan office had turned. James felt the sudden, hot prickle of being watched. Slowly, he pushed his chair back and stood. He reached for his phone on the desk. "I'll take that," the second officer said, his hand intercepting the device before James could touch it. "This is ridiculous. Am I being detained?" "We have a search warrant," Miles said, holding up the folded document. "For your person, your vehicle, this workstation, and your residence. We can either do this here, or you can come with us outside." "I suggest we step outside." The walk from his desk to the elevator was the longest of his life. He could feel the eyes of his colleagues, the sudden stop in the rhythm of typing. He was a professional, a leader in this building. Now, he was being escorted out by two men he did not know. His mask of polite confusion was welded in place, but beneath it, a cold chemical dread was beginning to spread through his veins. They stood in the bright, unforgiving Texas sun of the parking lot next to his Buick. "I need to explain what's going on," Miles said, his tone shifting from operational to conversational. "Did they explain anything inside?" "No," James said, forcing a short, baffled laugh. "No one has said anything. Is it about the AI images and stuff?" It was a probe. A calculated test. He offered them a plausible, minor tech crime, something a man in his field might dabble in, something explainable. Miles looked at him, his expression unreadable. "Yes," he said. And for a fraction of a second, James felt a wild surge of hope. "It took me a while to figure out who you were," Miles continued. "But I finally figured you out. That's why we're here." The hope vanished, replaced by a suffocating certainty. This was not about AI. This was not a misunderstanding. They knew. The detective's use of "figured you out" and "sneaky" confirmed it. This was about him. The real him. "I have to be clear," Miles said. "You do not have an arrest warrant. No matter what you tell me right now, you are leaving today. You'll go home. But we need to figure this out, Michael. We have people going to your house right now." That was the sentence. That was the one that broke the dam. The carefully constructed walls of his life, his job, his marriage, his reputation crumbled in an instant. The blood drained from his face. "Oh God," he whispered. The words were not for the detectives, but for himself. A prayer to an entity he hadn't considered in years. "Are they going there right now?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Yes," Miles said. James leaned against the hot metal of his car for support, his vision tunneling. He saw Jenny's face. He saw her confusion, the chaos of the dogs, the officers walking into his home. He saw the dog room. He saw the computer. "Oh God. Oh God. Oh God," he repeated, the sound a low, desperate mantra. He was not thinking of his wife's pain. He was not thinking of Hannah. He was thinking of the digital vault, the collection, the thousands of files. He was thinking of the exposure. "What's going on at the house?" Miles asked, his voice probing. "My wife," James managed to say, his breath short. "My wife is there. She has no idea." He looked at the glass doors of his office building, the place that had defined him. He looked at the detectives. The game was over. The hunt had ended, and he was the prize. "My marriage is over now," he said, the words a flat, dead statement of fact. "It's all over." The house was, as usual, a symphony of chaos. Jenny was at the kitchen table, a fortress of paperwork surrounding her. Adoption forms, veterinary invoices, and transport schedules were fanned out across the oak, a testament to the lives she was trying to save. In the background, the chorus of her babies was in full throat, a deep bass bark from the living room, a sharp, anxious yapping from the utility room. It was the soundtrack of her life, and she was, for the most part, deaf to it. Then, a new sound cut through the noise. It was not the light tap of a volunteer or the scratch of a dog. It was a heavy, official thud on the front door. Jenny sighed, annoyed, and pushed her chair back. It was probably a delivery driver, impatient. She navigated the maze of dog beds and toys to the entryway, the barking reaching a crescendo as she neared the door. She pulled it open, a polite, tired smile on her face, and it froze. Two men stood on her porch. They were not delivering supplies. They were officers. "Jenny Wilson," the lead officer asked. His voice was calm, firm. "Yes," she said, her hand tightening on the doorknob. Her first thought was a complaint. Is this about the dogs? I have all the permits, I assure you. Ma'am, I'm with the Tom Green County Sheriff's Office, he said, ignoring her question. We have a search warrant for your home. The words seemed to hang in the air, nonsensical. A warrant, she repeated, her mind fumbling. A warrant for what? Why? The officer's eyes were steady. Your husband, James, is being spoken to by investigators at his workplace right now. This warrant is part of an investigation into the possession of illicit materials. Jenny stared at him. The barking faded. The paperwork on her table, her entire world of rescues, simply dissolved. The words James and illicit materials refused to connect in her brain. They were like two opposing magnets, repelling each other. What? She said, her voice a thin whisper. No. That's impossible. You have the wrong house. You have the wrong man. She tried to laugh, a dry, terrified sound. James. My James. He works in advertising. He helps me with the dogs. This is a mistake. It has to be. The officer's expression remained unchanged, a wall of professional calm. Ma'am, is there anyone else in the home besides you? Her mind, desperate for an anchor, for any explanation that made sense, finally found one. It was a dark, painful memory, but it was one that fit. Oh God, she said, her hand flying to her mouth. Is this about our daughter? Is this because of Hannah? She was speaking quickly now, the words tumbling out in a rush of panicked relief. She had found the answer. It was years ago. She had a phone, and she sent some pictures. To a boy. We struggled with it, we talked to her, we took away her social media. It was awful, but it's over. It was all handled. She looked at him, pleading, You're investigating an old issue. The lead officer listened, his expression never wavering. He let her finish. Then, with a slow, devastating finality, he shook his head. No, ma'am, he said, his voice gentle but firm. This investigation is not about your daughter. He paused, letting the weight of his next words land. It is about him. The relief that had flooded her system turned to ice. The one logical life raft she had clung to was gone. She was left floating in the officer's impossible accusation. James. She whispered again, but the name now sounded foreign. Oh my God, she said, leaning against the doorframe, the strength gone from her legs. This is so awful. Ma'am, the officer said, we need to come inside. She could only nod, her world, the one she had so carefully built, shattering into silent, invisible pieces at her feet. She sat at the kitchen table, the epicenter of her life, and it now felt like a stranger's room. An officer, the one with the calm, steady eyes, sat across from her. He hadn't touched the glass of water she had numbly offered. The rest of his team was elsewhere in the house. She could hear the quiet, methodical sounds of their movements, a door opening, a muffled voice, the soft tread of shoes on the hallway floor. Each sound was an intrusion, a violation. I don't understand, Jenny said again, her voice a thin, dry whisper. You have to believe me. This is a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. The officer's voice was neutral, almost gentle. You said you haven't suspected anything. Nothing at all unusual about his behavior. No. Suspect what? Her voice cracked with a frantic energy. She leaned forward, desperate to make him understand, to present the evidence of her reality. You don't know James. He's the kindest man I've ever known. We just went to that movie, Sound of Freedom, a few weeks ago. He was. We were both just destroyed by it. He was so upset. He is so adamant against all of that awful world. He wouldn't. He couldn't. She was speaking quickly now, her mind seizing on any memory, any proof of the man she had married. She was building a case, not just for the officer, but for herself. He helps me with the rescue. He's gentle with the dogs. He loves me. He loves Hannah. You've got the wrong person. The officer did not write anything down. His silence was a vacuum, pulling more words from her. When is he usually on his computer? He asked. The question so casual, it felt like a trap. He works, she said immediately. He's a creative director. His mind is always working. He's on his laptop for work, or he's on his phone playing games. But we're together all the time. That's what you don't understand. We are always together. This was the truth. This was the fact that made his accusation an impossibility. He's home most days. We have dinner together every single night. We watch television. We talk. We are a very close family. Hannah adores him. He's her father in every way that matters. And at night? The officer asked, his gaze unwavering. Jenny almost smiled, the expression a pained grimace. He's a night owl, she said, offering this detail as a charming, intimate fact. He always has been. He used to work night shifts, years ago, so his schedule is it's just different from mine. I go to bed, he stays up, that's it. He stays up and does what? Works, she insisted. He finishes projects, he answers emails, or he just decompresses. He's in his study. That has never been suspicious to me. My God, why would it be? This is my husband we're talking about. The defense of him was becoming a defense of her own life, her own judgment. To believe the officer was to admit that her entire marriage, her entire family, was a lie. From down the hall, she heard another officer's voice, muffled but clear. We're in the back room, the one with the computer. Jenny's head snapped toward the sound. That's just the dog room, she said, her voice rising in pitch. That's just my rescue paperwork. There's an old computer in there, but he never uses it. It's for the shelter. It's my room. The officer at the table did not turn. His radio crackled, and a low voice spoke a code she could not understand. He simply looked at her. Ma'am, you said you're always together, he said, his voice flat. Yes, we are. He's never alone with anyone, not for any dark reason, just because we're a family. We are always together. She was pleading, her portrait of her husband becoming more desperate, more detailed, as if she could will it into truth. She painted a picture of a loving, gentle, harmless man. And as she spoke, in the back of the house, his team was just beginning to find the brushstrokes of the monster he had hidden underneath. In the parking lot, the mask of the successful creative director was gone. James Wilson, Michael, was just a man standing by his car, his life evaporating in the Texas heat. It's over, he whispered, more to himself than to the detective. My marriage, my job, it's all gone. Detective Miles saw the opening. The wall of denial had not just cracked, it had disintegrated. Talk to me, Michael, he said, his voice quiet, almost gentle. What's over? Help me understand what we're going to find in there. James took a shaky breath. The confession, held back for so long, began to spill out, a dark, thick poison. It started a while ago. A few years. What started? James looked at the ground, unable to meet the detective's eyes. The spark, he said, his voice hoarse. It was my stepdaughter, Hannah. Miles kept his expression neutral. What about her? I caught her sending pictures. To a guy. You know, pictures. She was younger then. And I saw them. And I don't know, it sparked something. It wasn't. I wasn't attracted to it. Not like that. It was just the idea that girls this age were doing this. It got in my head. He was speaking faster now, the words tumbling out. So I went online. I started looking. I made a profile. Smoke obsession. I pretended to be this girl, and people would send stuff. Videos, pictures. They just sent them. And you saved them, Miles stated. It was not a question. Yes. I saved them. I got it and I saved it. I got it and I saved it. It was like a collecting thing. That's all. Just a collecting thing. An addiction. You understand. Like a drug. It's not me. He was pleading now, desperate for the detective to see the distinction. Most of it, to be honest, I haven't even watched. I was just saving it. It was just collecting. It's not who I am. It's just this stupid obsession. He looked at Miles, his eyes hollow. She doesn't even know, my wife. She has no idea any of this happened. Back at the house, Jenny was still sitting at the kitchen table, her mind a whirlwind of defense and denial. Then, the lead officer returned from the back of the house. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," he said. "Have you found something?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Is it Hannah's old phone?" "I told you." "We need you to look at the computer in the back room," he said, cutting her off. She followed him down the hall, past the kennels, into the small, cluttered room she called her office. A technician was sitting at the desk, his back to them. "This is just my rescue computer," she said, her voice rising. "It's just paperwork and donor lists." "The computer is logged into your husband's cloud storage account," the technician said, not turning. "We have found the folders reported by the service, but we also found another one." He pointed to the screen, to a folder name. It was 3 letters, HJW. Jenny stared at it. The letters meant nothing for a second. And then, the blood drained from her face. That's Hannah," she whispered. "Hannah." "Ma'am," the lead officer said, his voice heavy, "we are seeing videos in this folder. Videos and images." "It's the old ones," Jenny insisted, her voice breaking. "It's the pictures she sent. He must have saved them to scold her, to show her." The technician finally turned, his face grim. "Ma'am, these files are not from a phone. The dates are recent. And the angle. It's high, it's from the corner of a room." Jenny's mind flashed, a sickening, dizzying lurch. A memory, insignificant, buried. The light," she stammered. "What light, ma'am?" "James," she said, her hand rising to her mouth. Months ago, he installed a party light on the ceiling in her room. For her birthday, he said it was just a silly, fun light. It spins." The officer's silence was her answer. The blood in her veins turned to ice. It wasn't a light, it was a camera. The man she loved, the man who had raised her daughter, had been watching. She was reeling, her entire body shaking. The room, her sanctuary of rescue, felt like it was tilting. A camera. A hidden camera. "But why?" she whispered, the question to herself, to God, to the officer, just to watch her. The technician at the desk, who had been quietly scrolling, suddenly stopped. His professional demeanor hardened. He clicked open a file, read 2 lines, and immediately closed it. He opened another. His face was pale. "What?" Jenny said, seeing the change in him. "What is it?" "Mott," the lead officer said, moving toward her. "Let's go back to the kitchen." "No," she yelled, her voice raw. "What did you find? Tell me." The officer looked at the technician, who gave a single, grim nod. The officer turned back to Jenny. "Ma'am, in the same folder. There are text documents. Many of them." "What are they? What do they say?" The officer struggled for words, his training providing no script for this. They appear to be stories. Fictional stories. Written by your husband." "Stories about what?" she cried. "They are deeply graphic, ma'am. They are his fantasies. And they are about Hannah." This was the blow that shattered everything. The camera was a passive, perverted intrusion. This was active. This was creation. This was desire. The man she had defended at that very table, the man she said was so adamant against all that, was not just a collector. He was a creator. He was the author of the very darkness she believed he despised. Jenny's denial did not just break, it evaporated. The man she lived with did not exist. He was a fiction, and the man sitting in his place was a monster. The sound she made was not a sob, it was a low, tearing groan of a life being ripped in two. Back in the parking lot, James had confessed to the online world, the collecting, the persona. He was trying to frame it as a distant, digital sickness, something separate from his real life. Detective Miles let him talk, let the dam of secrets break. "And it's all in the cloud," James finished, his voice weak. Just folders. That's all." Miles looked at him. The confession felt incomplete. Too clean. "Michael, we are searching your house right now. We are searching this office. My people are going to find every device. Is there anything else you want to tell me? Any thumb drives? Any external hard drives? Do not make us find it, Michael. Tell me now." James froze. The confession had been a gamble, an offering to appease them. He had held back the last, most significant part, but he saw in the detective's eyes that the game was over. There was no move left to make. His shoulders, which had been tense, slumped in final defeat. In the car, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "What's in the car, Michael?" In the glove box. "There's a passport drive." "An external one." Miles's blood ran cold. "And what is on that drive, Michael?" James turned his head away, unable to look at the detective as he pronounced his own sentence. It's the main collection," he whispered. It's everything." "How much is everything?" James shook his head slowly, a single tear of self-pity rolling down his cheek. "Thousands," he said. "Probably thousands of videos on it." The passport drive was not a collection. It was an abyss. When the forensics team analyzed it, the scope of James Wilson's secret life became horrifyingly clear. The Dropbox account had been a mere sample, a tiny fraction of his obsession. The passport drive was the vault. A forensic supervisor called Detective Miles hours later, his voice flat, devoid of the usual professional detachment. "Miles," he said, "you need to see this. We found 3 hidden folders. They're comprehensive." "How much?" Miles asked, bracing himself. "The file count is staggering. We are logging over 2,700 individual videos. And that's not counting the image files." Miles was silent, the number settling in his mind. "And the runtime," the tech continued, "we've estimated a combined runtime of over 200 hours. A lifetime of obsession, hidden in a small plastic box in his car." But the supervisor was not done. "Miles, it's not just the content we were expecting. There's something else. Something different." "What?" Miles asked. "It's explicit content. With animals," the tech said, his voice low. "In some cases, the two are combined." Miles felt a wave of genuine sickness. He thought of the warrant, the details of the home. "His wife," he said, "she runs the pet rescue." "From the house." "Yeah," the tech replied. "I saw that. Dozens of stray dogs." The final, depraved piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The home Jenny had built as a sanctuary for the innocent was the same home James had used to harbor his obsession with them. The two halves of their life, the light and the dark, were monstrously, inextricably linked. The intercutting of a life's end, happening in 2 places at once. In the parking lot, Detective Miles walked back to James, who was now just an empty shell of a man leaning against his Buick. "We found the drive, Michael." James just nodded, his eyes vacant. He looked at the office building, then at the street. "I'm not staying here," he said, his voice flat, dead. "My job's over. My life's over." "You don't know that, man," Miles said, a strange, misplaced flicker of pity. James's head snapped up, a final convulsive jolt of energy. "I know it." He spat, his voice suddenly sharp. "I know it, 100%. There's nothing. I've lost everything. Everything." He knew what was on that drive. He knew there was no path back. Simultaneously, at the kitchen table, the lead officer sat down across from Jenny. She was staring at the wall, her shock having given way to a terrifying, cold stillness. "Ma'am," the officer said, his voice gentle. "Jenny, we need to tell you what we've found." He laid it all out, the full confession from James at his office. The passport drive, the thousands of files, the hundreds of hours of content, and then the final, unspeakable detail, the one he had dreaded telling her. "Ma'am, we also recovered a large amount of explicit content involving animals." Jenny did not cry. She did not scream. Her face, which had been a mask of desperate love and confusion, hardened into something unrecognizable. The blood in her veins, which had frozen, now felt like it was boiling. She finally, truly, saw the man she had married. She saw her rescue, her life's work, and what he had been doing while she did it. Her gaze lifted, slow and steady, to meet the officer's. Her voice was not a whisper. It was low, clear, and filled with a cold, pure rage that was more frightening than any shout. "I cannot believe," she said, each word a piece of ice, "he would do that to us." The collapse was total and absolute. According to online sources, James Wilson was arrested that same day, August 21st, in the year 2024. The charges were for the production and transportation of illegal materials involving children. With the evidence from the Dropbox account, the hidden camera, the written fantasies, and the abyss of the passport drive, the trial was swift. The evidence was absolute. On March 31st, in the year 2025, he was sentenced. The judgment was 50 years in federal prison. The judge, seeing the calculated and predatory nature of his actions, added a stipulation, without the possibility of parole. For Jenny, the world had ended and been reborn in the same horrifying instant. In the wake of the revelations, in the unraveling of every shared laugh, every meal, every I love you she had ever built with him, she filed for divorce. The legal action was a formality, a closing of a door that had already been blown from its hinges. She and Hannah left the house. They could not stay in the place where the walls themselves held the memory of his betrayal. They moved, seeking anonymity, seeking a place where the air was not thick with the ghosts of his secrets. The house on the hill, once a beloved local symbol of rescue and compassion, a place of second chances, was sold. Its new owners would never know the depth of the darkness that had lived and hunted just on the other side of the drywall. Thank you for joining us for this harrowing story. We appreciate you spending your time with us, and we hope to see you again for our next investigation. Until then, stay safe.